Hey, it's me, and today we're going to do something I promised I would never do on this channel. And that is talk about a book that I really didn't like in great detail and the reasons I didn't like it. That doesn't mean I would never want to be negative about a book, of course not. However, I never thought I would make a video specifically to say this is a 1-star review and this is why. Because I like positivity, I like to bring the good things into your life because the world is full of people trying to sell you bad things to make you angry, and I don't want that. However, sometimes what goes on in a book and the reasons for a book having issues aren't the author's fault. They're to do with the industry and the author being let down by that industry, and so I want to highlight that and discuss it and talk very frankly. So hopefully that sounds good. Hopefully that interests you. The book is One Yellow Eye by Leigh Radford, which is a recent release, very suitable for the Halloween season. We're going to discuss that in more detail after the intro. If that sounds good, please join me. So first of all, this video will have spoilers for this book. So if you've not read it already, or you really don't want me to spoil or go into detail, please be aware that this is coming throughout. I will be talking frankly about some of the things that happens. I won't talk too frankly about the end of the book, but there will be things. So if it means the world to you to read this for yourself, please go and do that before watching this. I will understand. I've already discussed this in another video. Whether you've seen that video yet, I don't know, but I read this book for an Addams Family bingo of all things. And I was expecting it to be a very easy and straightforward read. And it turns out I had so many thoughts and feelings and emotions about this book. I wanted to make a separate video while it was still fresh and do it in more detail because I think what I have to say would kill the vibe of the Addams Family fun that I was trying to create. So here we are. Let's go. So what is the book about? Well, One Yellow Eye is about a zombie virus outbreak in London. It's the aftermath of an outbreak in London, actually. Everyone is mostly piecing themselves back together, so to speak. And now the focus is really on the research and cure for this virus in case it flares up again and causes more deaths and problems. And what happened is that everyone who was zombified, infected, was destroyed. And everyone is just piecing their lives back together. However, the main character, her husband was infected and she chose to hide him in their spare bedroom and basically not give him up to the authorities. So she is hiding the last infected zombie in England in her spare bedroom. And she's doing this because she's a research scientist and she's trying to get onto the government program, this ultra top secret program that is trying to cure the disease. She's trying to get onto that, to find a cure, to bring it back to her husband, and hopefully then they can live happily ever after. That is the plot. That's pretty much all there is to the plot, and it's really just about how she goes about it for the rest of the book. And I picked it up because I love zombie novels. Any zombie content, I'm here for it, and I was really excited to read a more literary, romantic story in which the zombie chaos wasn't the focus, it was the background to it. And I thought maybe there would be a little bit more emotion and it would deal with some grief, things that I like exploring in fiction. So I wasn't here for your Walking Dead antics. I was here for what I thought the purpose of this book was, which is a literary examination of grief and loss via the lens of a zombie virus. It also reminded me of Shark Heart, which is a book that I just loved, which was a story in which mutation causes a husband to slowly become a shark, and it's about the caring nature of the wife dealing with that and also addressing the end of a marriage that's only truly just begun. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And I thought this would maybe be something similar, but unfortunately it wasn't. More worryingly, I saw a lot of hype for this book. This book has been sent out in PR to people. Everyone's mentioning it, and they have every right to do so. If they've been sent a book and it looks really cool, why wouldn't you? I don't know how well it's doing on the bestseller list actually, but it's definitely got some buzz, it's got some hype, and it's got some publishing machinery behind it. So it's doing very well, and it was on sale over the last few weeks, which is when I picked it up. So this book is not some indie unknown. This is a book that has a real energy behind it, which is one of the reasons I'm willing to discuss it in this way. If it was just a small book by a small author, I wouldn't be here. But let's go on to it. Let's start with what this book does well. So the thing this book does really, really well is the virus itself and the science behind the virus. It's not particularly deep, but it's enough. It's enough that you can go, that makes sense as to why a zombie virus would occur. That makes sense scientifically enough. There's always going to be some hand-wavy conclusions and things that maybe a true scientist perhaps wouldn't understand, but it's enough. You can believe it. Was even interested in the medical cause. This is something that's seen in snakes as a real disease, and I was intrigued as to whether that's true. I am deeply scared of snakes. I'm not going to look it up, but I was intrigued, which for a story about snakes was a big achievement. So that was done really well. I also thought there was a lot of good tension, especially as she tries to hide her husband. She lives in a flat with people above and below her, with a doorman. This is not a situation where she can have him causing noise, causing chaos. So the tension when that became a risk, it really was there, and it worked very well, especially for the first third of the book. So that was done really well. Unfortunately, everything else was a problem. Let's get into it. If you put a gun to my head and said, summarise what's wrong with this book, in a punchy, made-for-YouTube way that doesn't really reflect how things are, but sounds good, I would say, imagine if Emerald Fennell wrote a zombie novel. You know who Emerald Fennell is. She wrote Saltburn. There's been a massive thing about how rubbish her new Wuthering Heights looks. That's the vibe. Emerald Fennell zombie novel. And I think the reason that comes to mind to me is because there is a posh arrogance to this novel that seeps through it, and it's a kind of poshness you can only understand if you're British, really. It's something you recognise and feel. It says, I'm 100% right, and even when I'm not, you will respect and love me anyway. And that seeps through this novel. I don't know the class status of this author. I think to have done as well as she has in terms of journalism and publishing and the kind of courses she's done, I would imagine she comes from the wealthy end of the spectrum, but I don't know. I'm not casting aspersions on her life. But even if she isn't that way in real life, it's there in the writing, something about it, an arrogance, and it feeds into her character. And I thought the arrogance of the main character in this novel was intentional. I thought for the first third, which I really enjoyed, this is intentionally done for her to grow and develop throughout the book. I mean, she's privately arrogant. Things like her husband was a creative executive for advertising, and she literally goes, I thought his job was worthless. Like, just not medical, not saving lives, therefore worthless. And then professionally, she's very arrogant. She's very dismissive of her colleagues, who she tends to think are idiots. And even when she doesn't think they're idiots, she mocks them or thinks that they are personally unpleasant to be around. And she's absolutely sure of her rightness on all things, especially scientifically. And if you've done any sort of science or studied science in any way, that's the antithesis of the scientific method. It's everything that's wrong with science and everything that scientists try not to do. And yet here she is going, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I'm right. And it's up to science to agree with me rather than not disagree with me, which is the way science actually works. So it was frustrating on just a scientific level, but the arrogance of that, it just goes on and on, as everything she's saying is, I am right, I am right. And I was expecting the book to turn around and go, no, you're not, what are you going to do about it? And it doesn't. It just doesn't. And I also expected this book to be about a toxic and unhealthy grief. I thought this tying up your zombified husband and living with him for a year, for spending all your life devoted to trying to cure someone who's dead. I thought the message of that was, I need to move on. I need to let him go and start my own life again, as hard as that is and as horrible as that is, because that is the story of all grief. And yet, the message of this book is, no, she was right. She was right to keep the faith against all the odds, to never give up on her husband, to never accept that he might be dead. She was right, and that's insane. Because everything she does to achieve that is things that I think you and me and most people would find abhorrent, immoral even. And yet she's willing to do it. And she never has a moment of doubt, not for a second. She needs her husband, and whatever the cost, she's going to keep him. She never has the doubt that I think a lot of people who have experienced the struggles of a loved one with dementia, or the kind of coma issues, things where they are present yet not present. Their body is there, but they are not. And the thing is, a lot of people have had that experience, and it's horrible and painful. And although I've never gone through it, I'm very fortunate in that way. I can only imagine that the more it progresses, the more you doubt, the more you go, what is the right thing to do? Because there's what I'm feeling and what the medical people are saying, and I don't know what's right, and I don't know what's best for this person. And I think that to have that equated with, I'm going to do everything I can to keep this person with me, no matter how much they suffer, no matter how much they may never have wanted it, no matter how unlikely it is and how much it hurts me, but I'm still right to do it. I think that's on some level deeply offensive and hurtful and worrying, because I would be very disturbed if I turned into a zombie. I'd be disturbed on a lot of levels, obviously, but if I did, and I was married and my partner decided to keep me essentially as a pet in the hope that one day I'd come back, and they play-acted marriage with my dead body, I would be horrified, not just for the indignity of it for me, and for this assumption that they know me enough that I don't actually need to mentally be there, that they can just do my part for me. That's disturbing on one level. But also, I'd be upset for them. I'd be devastated for them that they needed me so much that they couldn't move on ever. I mean, obviously on an ego level, you'd be like, well, I want you to grieve a bit, cry a little bit, feel a bit sad, but not forever, not for an unhealthy, desperate, dangerous amount of time. It's just not right. But anyway, then that arrogance seeps into the plot. The arrogance of the author, and I'm not calling them arrogant, but I think there's a worldview that is in the pages of this that I think is unfair, and again slightly offended me as someone who had actually experienced some of what they were implying. So supposedly most of London dies in this, like 95% of London dies, and the rest of the UK is saved for some reason. That it's cordoned off. London is left to kind of deal with it, and it's now London is trying to recover, and the few people left are trying to live normal-ish lives. And the thing is, I lived in London and I went through the Great Pando in London. I spent all of those years in a bedsit by myself, not able to leave what was essentially a room the size of this room. And I did it, and I saw the normal people going through it and felt the community around me going through it. Yeah, for this criticism to make sense, you have to understand the British character to a certain level. And that is this. We are a deeply individualistic society, but there is a part of us that when a crisis occurs, our brains switch to, now it's time to do my bit. So we are deeply individualistic, but then when there is an opportunity to step in and help, we become almost overly community-minded. We are willing to sacrifice, we are willing to suffer, we are glad to suffer if we will do our part for the good of our people. It's one of those things that is discussed endlessly by the media, and it's part of our psyche. The Blitz spirit is something I'm sure you've heard of. And it's not entirely true. There is always bad people doing bad things in a crisis. We're not saints in any means. And a lot of the so-called Blitz spirit was propaganda. However, it's something we do still carry with us, and it's a very deep part of us. You're hyper-individual until it's time to do your bit. And that happened during the pando. It did. There was an example where the government asked for volunteers to deliver medication to the elderly and people trapped at home. And I think the website crashed because hundreds of thousands of people started volunteering across the country. They didn't need that many people. And everyone was like, yes, this is something I can do. I'm going to do it. So that was a thing. And vaccines, obviously everyone was obsessed with vaccines for the pando. And I remember no one was pushing for them. No one was like, where are they? Where are they? We need them. I want to go back to normal. I want my vaccine. Instead, it's like, well, they're doing their best. We'll do our bit and do what we need to do until we get them. And we were super proud of the NHS when we did get them. So all that is to lead up to this, which is to say that even though this virus is far more extreme and a lot more people died and there would be a lot of trauma, I don't think that even after all that, the average person would act like they do in this book. This book begins with someone in a therapy group finding out that the main character is a scientist and haranguing her in front of the entire group as to why there is no virus cure yet. And as a British person, I don't care what trauma I've gone through. I wouldn't do that with a gun to my head, and I don't know anyone who would. It's the most shameful thing a British person could do. It's like jumping to the front of the queue. You don't do that. And it just made me question everything this author said and did. Because how could you be British and not understand that about the people who actually did this? You lived this in some way. You were no doubt experienced this pandemic. So it made me question things. Maybe it's a very personal thing, but I think books about outbreaks and viruses after you've gone through one hit very differently and have to be dealt with in a certain way. And you don't offend the people who actually did that in that location, you know? Anyhow. And I also could have understood if that had been the point, to go, even British people, their spirit has been broken in this way. But it wasn't done in any sort of way. It was just like, this is the default. This is how people react. And it left a nasty taste in my mouth. And this also kind of leads into the lack of emotion in this book. It's never handled as I think real emotion feels like. So the couple that feature in this story have been married for 20 years. They are both edging on 40 and have been together since they were students. That's 20 years of life, of experience, of growth together, of problems, all of these things. And none of that is ever gone into. The only thing I know about their relationship, after this woman obsessed about her husband for an entire book, are that they met as students in a club, that they have been on holiday at least twice, that they once had their parents over for Christmas and that he listened to records. And I think at some point he may have gone out and got pastries once. That is the level I know this man after an entire book. And I did wonder, is this because the author wants us to understand that he's gone and to not get attached to him? To only see him as a dead body? To only see him as a zombie and not a person and someone we shouldn't be attached to, and would make us understand that she is reading too much into this, that she is not able to let go. But no, because again, the character is right. The main character is always right. And the book at the end makes clear that she was right to do this, and she doesn't get exactly what she wants, but she gets close to it. Like, it just baffles me. Why should we care about this relationship? Because it doesn't feel real. There's no mention of sex. There's no mention of children. Even a couple that doesn't have children, there is a reason. Whether that be they said they don't want children, or they couldn't have children, or neither of them just ever felt that longing, but it still gets discussed in a relationship. It just utterly baffles me. And then her flaws are mentioned very often. She's bad at making and keeping friends. She doesn't like people. She's a workaholic. She's an alcoholic. This is addressed frequently and yet never a problem. But she doesn't ever address those flaws. She doesn't do anything to work on it. She doesn't grow, change. She is perfect at the beginning and she is perfect at the end. And that worries me as a reader. And then just to move on to the bit that I found stupid more than anything else, which is the science. As I said, the actual explanation for the zombiehood, that really worked for me. I thought that was really good. Everything else was a problem. So I also want to point out, I'm not a scientist. I did a social science degree, so I do have an understanding of the scientific method. I understand the spirit of science, even if I'm not technically very educated in science itself. And I checked, and this author is a journalist with no scientific background, so everything in it is something she's had to learn, and I think she's done that fairly well. It doesn't feel like someone who is just parroting things they've researched. It feels at least like someone has done a lot of work, and I do appreciate that. However, the science itself, for example, everything science that happens is kind of forced for the plot. So a vaccine works when it's suitable for it to work. It fails when it's most dramatic for it to fail. And ethics are discarded when they're useful but essential when they're dramatic. So there's one scene that I nearly rolled my eyes out of my head, in that they find an actual moving zombie still in London somewhere and bring it into the lab. And this is a top secret MI5 level, hidden deep underground kind of facility where they've had to sign their whole life away in terms of NDAs and so on. And they found this essential for research zombie, and they need him. And the main character is like, well, you need to tell the family. And they're like, well, this zombie's been missing for months and months and months, and it's now essential for our research. So no, that's the way the cookie crumbles. The government does things when it needs to, unfortunately. And she has the temper tantrum to end all temper tantrums about lying to the victim's family. He even has a donor card, by the way. They're like, he has a donor card. He would want to help science. And she literally has an absolute meltdown. Cut to a little while later when they're like, well, we're going to need to do vaccine testing, and we will be testing on animals, which they have to do in this instance because they need to infect them with a zombie virus first. And you cannot infect humans with a zombie virus if you don't have something that is almost guaranteed to cure them. And she is furious that there has to be slow animal testing instead of immediate human testing. To the point, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, she decides to go out clubbing and seduce men into joining as volunteers to take the vaccine. Think of the jumps you have to make to get there. I am going to go clubbing to seduce men to be infected as zombies to take a vaccine for a secret project that I'm not allowed to tell them about, and yet somehow I'm going to tell anyone who will listen while drunk about it in the hope that this vaccine will somehow work on them and I can take it back to my husband. The leaps there. What happens when 10 burly, slightly drunk men turn up at the super secret facility and are like, yeah, sign me up? What happens? And that's like, fine, that's just like a thing. And it's a bit of a problem. And the police come in and are like, you were a bit drunk and a bit weird. And then she was like, yeah, I was a bit drunk and a bit weird. What of it? And they're like, oh, okay. There's no consequences. No consequences. She just literally might have got out her tits and yelled, I'm a spy. What would MI5 have done if Dame Judy had done that, huh? They wouldn't have gone, oh, well. It's just, yeah, I'm just absolutely flabbergasted. My gaster is flabbered. And the lack of secrecy she has continues. She again decides to tell people or not based on how she feels. She is being pursued by a journalist and doesn't bother to ever mention it. She needs some research done on animals and she isn't a veterinary student, and for some reason the super secret lab that is trying to solve this crisis didn't consider looking at animal illnesses, only human ones. So she just literally walks into a library and looks at one veterinary book and is like, I have solved the entire crisis myself because I looked at one book. Anyhow, for some reason the internet doesn't exist, so she needs to ask a friend from uni who is a vet in America some questions. And instead of going, hey, I'm doing some research, or hey, I want to get a pet snake and I need to know about all this, please can you tell me? She literally just goes, yeah, I work for this super secret project, this is essential information, you need to help me with it. And this, again, no consequences apart from when he inevitably needs to tell some people about it on his end and there ends up being trouble. Like, what sort of insanity? What sort of stupidity? And again, and it continues, like, she has to be so perfect, so the plot has to be stupid in turn. For example, she's like, well, why the patient zero was in Madagascar. Why aren't we investigating what happened in Madagascar? And they're like, oh, actually, diplomacy-wise, we can't just accuse a country of having given him a disease, so we can't ask Madagascar about it. And like, I'm sorry, but I think if someone had turned up in your country from Madagascar with some deadly disease that killed millions of people, you might ask them some questions about where he was and what he was potentially doing. You might, you know. And then, again, they haven't bothered to look at animal things because it's not very convenient for some reason. And the book kind of hand waves it by going, oh, yeah, well, there's actually a super secret project where they're trying to weaponize this disease instead. So they're not working really hard on the cure. And like, why are you weaponizing a disease that isn't cured? Because if it's not cured, it is a weapon. And if your country has just suffered the most, so why are you like, well, the important thing is that we can set this on other people's countries? It's insane and it's stupid. And there's no reason for it. This doesn't tie into the plot in any way whatsoever. None. At all. It's just, well, the arrogance of the thing going, well, governments would probably do that because governments are shit. Come on. I made it. Right, deep breath. We're nearly there. Okay, I've got this. So let's talk about the industry. And I want to reiterate, again, I'm not blaming the author for this. They are a first-time author, and I do not think they are a bad writer. And while I will mock this book and complain about this book, I think that there is nothing in this book that couldn't have been fixed by someone helping them. And the thing is that a first-time author who got a 6-figure book deal for this book should have had a team of people helping and should have had an editor there to help them. And I'm angry on that author's behalf that they didn't have this. Now, it probably won't affect them. This book is getting decent reviews, decent ratings. I think it's only just under 4 on both Storygraph and Goodreads. So my opinion is almost certainly the outlier here. However, I am mad because I have skill as an editor. I'm not saying I am one professionally, but it's what I'm good at. And I could tell you 5 things off the top of my head that wouldn't be particularly time consuming that could have made that book about 70% better. 70% tighter, could have taken away a lot of the problems and made it a lot better. And all an author needs is someone who isn't in their head to go, hey, this is what you, as someone who's deep in this story, cannot see. Do this and you're going to have a better book. And I think the trend for the industry overall is to not do that, to either have people who aren't skilled enough to do that, or to not care because they're selling the concept of the book. They're saying zombie romance and you're buying it because it says zombie romance. And it doesn't matter if it delivers because you've already paid for it at that point. And of course, they want something that's going to have some buzz and sure grow. But it doesn't matter because the buzz is also going to come just from people going, look at this amazing concept. Try it out. And it upsets me because there needs to be consequences. There needs to be a trend for people to actually turn around to a publisher and go, why did you let this through? It's not the author's fault. In 99% of the cases, you don't get published if you are deeply shit. You get published if you're okay and you can be made better. And for some reason, the industry isn't making these people better. And it offends me because these authors, they can put out stuff that could be really great and it's the start of their career and they're going to have all this hype for one book and then they're not. And then the next book and the next book and the next book isn't going to get that hype. And the people who read the first book are going to go, well, it was bad. Or it didn't meet my expectations. They let me down. And so many authors are going to be damaged because of it. And it makes me really mad. Because the publishing industry is letting us down by releasing absolute shite into the world. And being willing to do so. Because it's quick and it's easy. And the concept and the cover will do the work. So yeah, I'm emotional and I'm mad. Take a deep breath. And it may be you really like that book. You may have read this and you are sitting there going, she missed the whole concept. She missed everything. Who is this strange woman sitting on the internet talking out of her backside? And it's within your right to do that. Because I am a strange woman, if not talking out my backside. You have every right to like a book. You really do. And if you liked this, I am so happy for you. And I hope it's a fave and that you will return to it over and over. Or that you just go, that was fun and move on, whatever you want. And you may also go, why didn't you DNF? Don't like it, don't read it. And honestly, if I'd realised the flaws of this book past before the halfway mark, I probably would have done, but I also don't have many audiobook credits at the moment and I needed an audiobook for my commute and so I kept listening. I would have normally DNF'd. But also I got to the halfway point and I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to share my feelings because this isn't the first time this kind of letdown has happened to me. I don't think it will be the last, but I think it's the one that's made me most angry. And the book itself has also made me angry on a number of levels that I don't think is the author's intention. I think they were talking about something personal to them without necessarily thinking about the implications for a lot of other people who are going through something a little bit close to home. I don't think they were thinking of anything other than their own pain and their own grief and the things they were feeling. But the thing they were feeling emotional about was something that you can fight to a certain extent. Obviously, cancer isn't necessarily a fight. You don't lose the fight. You don't if cancer gets you, unfortunately, it's not something you've done wrong by not fighting hard enough. But with cancer, there are certain tools at your disposal to try and fight medically, at least. And I think I can understand with a relative with cancer why you would think we're going to do everything we can to try and get you treatment, to try and get you through this. But it doesn't work when applied to this kind of zombie virus, which has other similarities. So I don't think the author was trying to offend anyone. I don't. I just think that it's unfortunate that no one else pointed that out or thought about it or suggested it. So yes, I'm going to leave you with some books that I think you might like. If this kind of book is your jam, but you're saying, well, you talk about absolute nonsense and go on about books that you hate in such detail, I thought you said you were a positive person. Why aren't you talking about something good? So I'm going to leave you with some good things, which are the books that I think you might like. So if this kind of love story appeals to you, this hanging on to a marriage despite a supernatural force pulling you apart, I again recommend Shark Heart. I will put these books on the screen so you can see them and see the authors. If you're looking for scientific zombies and a bit of London, The Girl with All the Gifts would be a really good shout. You might also like Feed by Shauna Maguire. Wasn't entirely my cup of tea, but it's still a good book, and I think that it's very likely something that you will enjoy if you're into that kind of fiction. If you're looking for a plucky group of scientists who are dealing with incredible things, I would suggest Jurassic Park, of course. If not, the Kaiju Preservation Society. All of those, even the ones that I haven't loved quite as much personally, I think they are good books and you will potentially get something out of them. So I think go off, seek great books on the subject, heal with good books, which is what I'm going to do. And again, I'm really sorry to bring negativity to this. I want to only bring honesty though, and fairness, and to never be disingenuous, never give fake opinions. And I'll always do my best in that regard. It's just that a book needs a delivery team, and unfortunately too many authors are being left to deliver the book on their own, and that makes me very angry. But peace and love, and if anything I've said made you interested in my other content, I'd really appreciate you checking it out. I'm a brand new channel and I'm still learning how to present and get my feelings across, but I do care a lot about books, and if that appeals to you, please do subscribe, check me out, and if not, just have a wonderful rest of your day.